Thanks for joining. It's certainly great to see so many people interested in this event, and we're hoping that you'll all get a lot of fun and out of tonight's discussion, and a lot of interesting insights and things to take away, and I guess look at doing as a subsequent step. Tonight, this evening, we're talking about tackling risk and compliance with robots, which we're really pumped and excited about. For this session, we are excited, overjoyed to be working with UiPath. This is our second virtual event since the pandemic hit, and it's certainly our first one with UiPath. And I think we're looking forward to hearing from everyone today. It's also good to see a mix of people in the audience, from people we've worked with for a long time to people we've haven't worked with before who are new to DB Results, and also to UiPath. We're partnering because together we both deliver lots of transformative programs around the world. For those of you who don't know us, we're all across Australia and throughout Asia. We're about 500 people in size, and we've been doing a lot of this automation, business process management, RPA type work for around about the past 8 years. It's certainly featured very heavily in the transformation programs we do, from the strategy work we do to program delivery management, agile business transformation, and also speed with fast-paced digital solutions. UiPath, I love this statement. We make robots so people don't have to be robots. Certainly taking those mind-numbing tasks and taking us all to a higher level. Leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, worldwide coverage, and offices throughout Australia. And one of the points I hope you'll get to understand today is robots is more than just the robot that does the automation. It's a whole spectrum of tools and capabilities, from discovery of processes and activities through to the management, the running of the robots, engagement of the organisation, and actually measuring results. So you'll see some of that stuff in action today. And I'm always amazed every time I look at this as to how broad that capability is and what is possible to be done with it. So we're here to make a difference, and this is the DB Results purpose statement. Quite simply, we've put it down into the word help, and that's around health, environment, lifestyle, and poverty. And I think given the current circumstances, that's become even more of a focus in everything we do. We're all affected by the pandemic globally, and it's one of those unique events that hopefully we don't have to go through again, that has hit all of those across the board for just about every organisation, from our personal health to impacts on the environment to the way we work, living at home, and poverty and hardship and so on, from people who just can't work through this. So there's a bit of an overtone of that today, but I don't want to dwell on COVID-19 because it's not just about that. But the one key message I wanted to provide there is that robots give us the speed to deal with the challenges of the pandemic now, not your typical approach where you're building a solution to deploy in 6 months' time. So when you're thinking about this and the challenges you've got, be it dealing with calls of hardship coming into your contact centre and having to respond to those quickly, or some other challenge that's really ramped up because of the impact of this, think about how you might be able to take advantage of this capability to address those challenges now. So there are three of us speaking today, a trio of presentations, little vignettes, about 15 to 20 minutes each. Matt Nidd, Executive Consultant from our Financial Services team, who is leading one of the largest transition programs in the financial services space at the moment. In the life insurance space, we'll be talking about some of the challenges that we see and that are impacting the industry from a regulatory compliance perspective, and discussing how robotics and automation can provide the capability to address some of those challenges. Tony, who's on the call, is our RPA Imaginator from UiPath. He's going to inspire us with what can be done with this capability and share some really good examples, show us some tools in action and also present a few case studies on what has been achieved with automation. And then I'll close things out with a bit about how you can adopt a robot and take one home today, and with some practical tips and advice about how you can get your automation program up and going within your organisation. But before we get into that, we thought we'd run a few polls to get a bit of interaction being in this virtual online webinar space. So I'm going to hand over to Kushta, who's our event manager, who's going to run that poll. So if you could all click on your multiple choice there about how much exposure you've had to automation RPA previously. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Is that someone from UiPath clicking on I am an expert? Yep. It's interesting, certainly weighted towards the complete novice, some experience sort of end of the spectrum. I don't know if everyone else can see this, but I'm certainly getting some live updates here. It looks like we've got just about all the responses in there. Do you want to show that to everyone? So I think so. That gives us a good idea of what we're going to talk about today. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Nidd, who's going to take us through some real stories from the wild.
Thanks, Pete. I'll just bring my slides up and switch modes, which amazingly seems to have worked first time. For those of you that I haven't, can I move the poll off the? I must have control. There we go. For those of you that I've not met before, I've been at DB for a long time, working in the transformation and transition space, in utilities and through utilities divestment and privatisation for years, and moved into financial services. I'm lucky enough to work with a number of large financial services providers, currently program managing the separation of MLC Life from NAB, and also providing advice to a couple of other large divestment or transition programs that are taking place as a result of the Royal Commission. So living it firsthand, I'm going to today just take you through some of the examples of where we're seeing robots and robot automation providing significant benefits to customers. And I'm going to provide the business examples, and then Tony will provide some quite detailed robot specific, UiPath specific examples and demonstrations of that capability. So what's changed? Look, looking at the invite list, this stuff's probably not coming as a big surprise, but if I was to break it into three big, large trends of change or buckets of change that we're involved with, and that are, I think, probably a good summation of what's happening in the industry. Obviously, the large banks have been asked to divest their wealth and life insurance businesses to remove any perceived or actual conflict of advising on these services, advising on their own services, and that for us has been a very big piece of business. Those are multi-billion-dollar divestments with very hard end dates and quite unique challenges. I'll talk more about in a minute. Obviously, there's been new compliance requirements across industry. For all participants, from life to financial advisors to banks, everything in between, and obviously there's a need to remediate historical events where products and services haven't been provided fully to customers. The need to obviously remediate those and ensure there's controls in place to prevent those things from happening again. This one's kind of close to my heart at the moment, so hence the reason I have brought it forward in the pack. Hang on, I'm just, sorry, trying to kill one of these screens here. There we go. So In the wealth and life insurance business divestments, these are characterised by quite short-run IT environment integration agreements and transitional services agreements that require separation of the businesses on 18 to 24 month timeframes generally. A mix of transformation and lift and shift type projects, but they're all characterised by significant disincentives not to separate on time. Ratcheting TSAs. They're also generally characterised by large numbers of older, poorly integrated and generally poorly documented applications and platforms. So quite a unique problem space to solve. We are working, to do everything from unpicked data, that's been blended between, say, wealth and life insurance businesses, all the way through to helping manage, the completion of transitional services agreements and full exit of these programs at work. Some of the areas that we're seeing robots and automation provide real business value, you can see in the coloured circles there. So complex data separations. We are seeing in all cases, sometimes for all systems, where it's a transformational or a migration, others where it's lift and shift to a lesser degree, but it challenges around the decommingling or separation of data, both structured and unstructured. So thousands of medical records, thousands of historical documents that have got both wealth packages and life packages on the same documents that require separation. The need to create metadata and linkages for this unstructured data once we are able to separate, and all the while having to manage privacy considerations, because there's information that's carried on one of the products that the customer wouldn't reasonably expect that the purchaser of the other, that's, for example, the life insurance policy, the company that's taking that over, to be able to have access to. That involves lots of repetitive tasks, lots of fairly mind-numbing analysis, and often tasks that we simply can't put enough bums on seats to complete, and hence using robots have proved to provide a faster and more cost-effective way to separation. Further complex transitional arrangements. So generally we're seeing on these with these customers that they'll have new data centers in place or their own existing data centers in place, and the transitional services agreement doesn't allow for any virtual connection between those data centers. So inevitably we end up with two things. One is dual entry of data between systems, that some have been migrated and some haven't been because they're being migrated in waves, and also large numbers of in-flight transactions when we do migrate, which then require fairly complex re-entry into the systems, which is better lends itself to robotics than putting a whole lot of backpackers in a room. Data quality and rectification, further to my point there around dual entry of data, we've got to make sure that dual entry of data is done accurately, and obviously systems lend themselves to that much better than people do. We've also seeing that in fact there's an obligation from APRA around, while you're moving the data, you have to be looking for events and improving that data. We've seen robots being used effectively in that use case. And I think I touched on the last point, complex coexistence, a number of times there, which is that very few of these companies are doing a big bang type separation. They'll be coming across in waves, whether they bring a retail book or some off sale books, and they need to still be able to have data which is being entered into both the existing data center and to systems in the new data center, which obviously lends itself to both data entry and controls being applied by robots. It's new compliance requirements. Again, looking at the list of people that were here for this call, this shouldn't be new. All industry participants in one way or another have been touched by the need to change their compliance regime and their risk regime. We are seeing, obviously significant controls around the fulfillment of services. And, again, in many cases, those compliance requirements have landed midway through a divestiture. So you're effectively in a situation where you're having to implement changes into applications whilst they're being separated, and making sure that you're doing that accurately, and you're able to demonstrate it's adequately controlled. Obviously, in putting these new compliance requirements, you've also got to rectify the issues that you've seen previously. And so what we're seeing customers doing is some very complex analytical work to identify where the affected customer groups, products, policies are, and then creating fairly complex workflows to drag out where those services haven't been provided, create calculations for the value that hasn't been exchanged, and then having to push that value back to the customer. These are what we would call, fairly single-use workflows, and that they're not part of the in-state IT technology environment, but obviously very important today to ensure that you can, maintain customer promises and obligations, remediate these issues with customers, and then apply controls to ensure these on these single-use workflows. And again, we've seen significant automation and robotics benefits provided into that stream. So they're the big ticket items that we're seeing at the moment with our customers. We've got multiple robotics implementations that are taking place, some that were already there and have been extended, some that are new. One of my customers next week has thousands of in-flight cover and claims items being transferred via robotics between new systems and old, so that they'll be landing in the new systems at the exact same status of fulfillment after the data migration. These are very real examples, and we're seeing very real benefits being provided to customers that have got hard dates to meet, whether they be transitional services agreements or new or altered obligations. So with that, I will hand over to Tony, who will take you through some of the more detailed examples of how UiPath can deliver on use cases such as these.
Thanks, Matt. Just before Tony jumps on, I might just jump in there. Just a quick note for everyone. If you have any questions throughout proceedings, if you'd like to post them into the chat, Kusha will be picking up those questions, and we'll read some of those out for a bit of Q&A as we go through. So we'll do the first round of that after Tony presents. In the meantime, I just wanted to run a quick poll just before Tony jumps on again. So the latest poll is, what challenge am I most interested in addressing? So reducing compliance cost and risk, increasing employee satisfaction and engagement, accelerating benefits from digital transformation, and improving customer experience. So if you could throw us, now this will help Tony with positioning some of the discussion today, but you're about to see some really interesting stuff, and thanks to Matt setting the scene with the challenge and some of the stuff that we're doing in some big hairy transformation work at the moment. Yeah, if you could fill out that poll, we'll present those results in a second, then we'll allow Tony to dance on the screen and dazzle you with some material in regards to automation. So all the results in. Oh, opportunity for more to vote. There we go. That's an interesting one. Bit of a mixed bag. Now this is the most important. Accelerate benefits from digital transformation and customer experience feature highly, which all of these things are interrelated. But yeah, very good to see. But without further ado, over to you, Tony, and take us through it.
Thank you for that. And I don't know about dancing on the screen. Last time I did that, I broke my leg, so I won't be doing too much dancing. I'm hoping you can all see my opening slide. Is that good? Thank you. Okay, so just a couple of intro slides to level set in terms of what is governance, risk and compliance and what is RPA, just so that we kind of know where I've kind of positioned the messaging, if you like. So the three pillars, and I'm obviously hoping that you all are over this. Governance is the ethical management of a company by its executives. Risk is the ability and effectiveness to mitigate risk. And compliance is conformance with regulatory requirements. That's kind of the case studies that I've tried to bring to you this evening to address those particular areas, but happy to discuss outside of this remit. In terms of what is RPA, it's a technology that allows anyone to configure their computer software or robot to emulate and integrate the actions of a human. So this is a real key difference between that and other automations, in that, yes, UiPath RPA can do API integration and web services and all the sort of normal integration that you've probably come across or heard of before. But one of the agile natures of the product is its very fast user interface to build connections by emulating what a human does with a keyboard and screen. And at the end of the evening, there will be an opportunity to see a robot being built live. I'm happy to do that, and we'll go into breakout rooms if we have time permitting. Robots utilize the user interface to capture data. And the other important thing, when we're talking about a robot that's sitting on your PC, the robot is acting as you and will inherit your login permissions and access to software. So when the robot does something on your behalf, that other program thinks it's you working. Okay, so just bear that in mind as we talk about some of the things robots can do. There are two types of robots, one called attended, which sits on your PC, and there's another called unattended. That sits on a service. It doesn't need any human interaction. It'll just do what it's been told and spit an answer back. The attended robots allow a little bit of communication. Maybe the robot needs some extra information to perform an activity, and that attended robot can then ask you for information, you as the user or the human that's involved in that particular process. And happy to explore that a little bit further as well if we need to. And thirdly, they interpret trigger responses and communicate with other systems. So the important thing is, just like a human would interact with other applications, a robot does the same thing. It can copy and paste data, it can move files around, it can read emails, it can save attachments. Pretty much anything a user does on their PC, a UiPath robot can be trained to do exactly the same thing. So what are some of the benefits of RPA? We've discussed those with Matt earlier, and I'll let you read those columns. And I guess the focus of our discussion today is improved compliance. That fourth column there, reducing manual errors to 0 or near 0, refocusing your workforce on more complex investigation and analysis, freeing up your staff from that boring work. And update robots as quickly as regulatory changes. It's no good putting a system or a process of rules in place if it's going to take 6 months to then change those rules as regulatory compliance changes. Again, one of the benefits of the UiPath RPA system is it's very, very agile and fast to change. And DB Results and their technical teams are able to build solutions for you using UiPath in such a way that you're going to get those benefits of fast changes to meet business needs. What I'd like to show you now is just a 2-minute video of an attended robot in action. So this robot is actually going to be sitting on someone's PC and interact with different applications. You'll see a high-level process happening just here. The robot is going to read an Excel spreadsheet, and there's going to be some employees in that spreadsheet. The robot's then going to go to a legacy mainframe system and grab some information. It's then going to go to Salesforce and get further information based on the results from the mainframe. It's then going to create an expense report, put that into a Word template, save the template up as a PDF, and email that to the manager that needs the report. Now, as the robot's doing its thing, it's also got some exception handling inside as well. And when it gets to Salesforce, if the employee's details are missing, it will go to the HR system, grab those details and add them to the Salesforce contacts details. And so when you see the robot get to Joanna, one of the employees, you'll see that exception process kick into place. And just to show you that we can, we've also added some integration to SAP. Notice in the sample spreadsheet, we've got some empty columns. The robot will fill these in as it's progressing through its process. The word template is very simple. It's just a very basic word template. Obviously, you can make that look and feel like your internal documents, but just for this demonstration, we've kept it easy to see. So now the robot is taking control of the PC. It's going to open and close applications as it needs. It's going to be interacting with that word template. It's copying data from different systems. It's navigating its way through the different menu levels in the different systems, especially SAP and mainframes. They're very heavy menu-driven applications. The robot can navigate through those quite quickly through training. So there we have the robot opening and closing, getting data as it needs, filling in the spreadsheet as it goes along, updating the expense report. And over onto the left, you'll see the Salesforce application. Joanna's just about to be put in. Her details are missing from contact, so the robot knows what to do. It goes to the HR system, grabs Joanna's details, opens up the create contact form, fills that form in, and carries on doing its normal process. So exception handling is taken care of as well. So hopefully you can see how this robot is doing just what a user would have done, only it's doing it faster, and more compliant and more accurately. So let's have a look at that spreadsheet as it's been moving along. You'll see now that the columns have now been populated with various information. This could be a job sheet for the team lead. So the robot is part of the team, and this is what the robot has done all day. And you've got this compliance checklist or a job sheet to make sure the robot's done what it's meant to do. Here's an example of the emails that have been automatically sent out with the attachments, and we'll just have a quick look at the PDF to see what's inside. And there's the expense report for one of those users. So hopefully you've seen how, you know, a very simple, very manual process can be automated by a robot in a very compliant and natural way, and doesn't detract too much from the way that you've been doing it. So there are two schools of thoughts in terms of approach. Do I re-engineer all of my processes first and then automate them? You can, why not? But that's going to take benefits while that re-engineering is taking place. Another school of thought is that you automate your manual processes as they are today. Because the robot is faster and compliant and accurate, you're going to get benefits from day one, even though it's the existing process. Phase 2 of your implementation could then be, let's re-engineer these processes and get even more benefit in phase 2. So again, DB Results team will be able to guide you on your journey and see what's best for you and your particular circumstances. Here's just a quick glimpse of the UiPath Studio. As I say, happy to show you this live if we have time at the end. But it really is a very visual, quick, drag, drop, configure way of building our robots. This is not to say that you do not have to have skills and training and best practice. And again, this is where the DB Results team can come in. They've got the nous to be able to take this tool and really give you that best practice and production strength training. Robotic training to meet your process needs. One of the things that I am still surprised by is most major organizations, when I talk to their risk and compliance team, are still reliant on spreadsheets. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be at least one of you listening this evening that will go, yes, I still use spreadsheets for some of my core risk and compliance activities. That may or may not be a good thing, but what we can do with UiPath robots is interact with those spreadsheets. And we can provide extra compliance, extra checking, extra validation to data that's going into those spreadsheets, and automate some of that mundane, lengthy cut and paste. And a couple of the case studies that I'll mention actually cover a little bit of this scenario as well. So some of the benefits that I'd like to discuss with some of the case studies are, first of all, accuracy. Our robots are very accurate. Meeting service levels, a little bit on fraud control, and I'll talk a little bit about AI and machine learning there as well. Compliance, scalability, staff retention, regulatory compliance, and also data aggregation. So as I mentioned, robots are very, very accurate. In fact, they are 100% accurate or 100% inaccurate. There's no middle way. If you train a robot to do the right thing, it will do it every time, 100%, 24/7, no sleep, no rest, as long as the application systems that it needs are available online. If you train the robot wrong and give it the wrong rules, of course, it's going to do the wrong rules 100% accurately. So having a well-trained and well-behaved robot is essential. And again, that's where the DB results team can come in and just make sure that the right processes are being addressed, the right rules are being complied with, and the robot is trained in the most appropriate way. So an example here is with Maitland. Maitland have 17 offices around South Africa in 12 jurisdictions. They've got 1,100 employees with an asset under administration of $220 billion. So they're a pretty big organization. And they had major problems around creating net asset values. And as you can see, what they have done, and I'll let you, I'm not going to go into too much detail. You'll probably read the slide quicker than I can talk through it. But what they've done really is to try and automate that data entry, that initial application data entry. And what they've done is they've actually managed to save 12 full-time employees worth of labor. And 80% of the process was complete when the accountants arrived each morning. That's freed up a lot of time, and it's made a lot of accountants very happy because it's removed that laborious, mundane, cutting, pasting, making sure data is accurate and put in the applications. So again, taking some very boring work, automating it, and making the lives of the employees happy. But the most important bit about it is the robot is accurate. It will check the information that's gone into those application forms, and it will verify and validate that data as well, something that maybe humans don't have time to do because they're still busy actually keying information in. So have a think about robots, how they might apply to your organization. And even though you're automating a manual process, think of what you could get the robot to do as extra in that same process that's not being done today, simply because you haven't had enough time. So adding extra validation, verification to the accuracy is a great benefit for introducing RPA into your processes. Meeting or exceeding service level agreements. Again, robots are great at executing high volumes, complex tasks, and doing it very fast, and something that humans just can't keep up with. One of the examples here is Hollard. They're an insurance broker. Hollard, again, it just happens to be another South African-based organization. That's not to say all our customers are in South Africa. It just happened to be the one that I've used here. They were formed in 1980, and they provide self-insurance programs for large corporate clients and banks. And they've now got businesses throughout Europe, India, China, the US, New Zealand, and Australia. So they've really expanded. And they had to start automating. Their service level agreements were just not being met. It was causing lots of hassle from a human point of view. And you can see in the results box there, by automating some of their processes, they freed up 2,000 hours per month. I mean, that is a colossal amount of time. 98% of these particular process now is fully automated. And it's a 91% reduction in the cost per transaction, simply because we've removed that human element. Humans are costly. And the more you can remove them, the cost goes down and the accuracy goes up. So again, an example here of how robots were used to meet service level agreements. Fraud control. This is something that's being used a lot within the UiPath RPA client base. And especially with the introduction of AI and machine learning. For example here, we can't name this bank. They've said no publicity, thank you, but I can talk about the actual case study. And should you want to have a connection with this particular client, we're able to create that introduction. I'm just not allowed to mention them publicly. But their solution was really around detecting fraud in their client base. And so our robots are trawling through the transactions looking for patterns. Traditionally, that was done by a human auditor. Now that's been audited and was very logical. There was logical calculations made to identify those fraudulent transactions. What we're seeing now in the last 18 months to 2 years is that machine learning and artificial intelligence is also being added to improve the fraudulent detection. And so UiPath robots are now getting and gathering the information and the transaction data, passing that over to your machine learning algorithms, waiting for the reply to come back, and then executing the reply from the AI on machine learning. Another local example, we had an auto parts retailer who's got several hundred retail outlets around Australia, and they were having a problem with staff doing cash rebates to themselves. So basically they were fraudulently going to the point of sale system, doing a cash rebate, putting the cash in their pocket and walking away at the end of the day. The problem wasn't big enough to have a team of investigators go and investigate every store, but it was still significant enough to be a problem. So they are now looking at using UiPath robots to pass point of sale data at the end of the day to a third-party machine learning provider who specializes in point of sale investigation. And then the results are passed back to the UiPath robots that will then initiate with the security team which stores and employees are of potential interest. That way, the organization can now focus its efforts on key number of key individuals to determine where they need to provide more guidance and training on employees not doing the wrong thing. Compliance friendly. The robots are completing work processes and creating audit trails and logs. And you saw an example of that in the short video earlier. The robot, as it's doing its job, is filling in an audit trail, updating other logs and systems as well. Everything the robot is doing is fully audited. And that means nothing goes unnoticed. If a robot makes a mistake, you can find out exactly where, when, and how the mistake happened. And then you can literally retrain that robot to fill in that missing rule or that new learning that's come from the logs. In the example here is Ladbrokes. They're a gaming organization over in UK and Europe. And what they were using the RPA for specifically was know your customer. They have to identify where there may either be fraud, money laundering, et cetera, et cetera. And know your customer was a big ticket item for them, and a lot of manual effort was done on checking the clientele that were coming into the shops and also on their online systems. And as you can see, what they're happening here is 7,000 customer verifications were handled in the first 4 weeks, 11,000 hours saved in the first week. This just shows how bringing automation to some of those mundane, boring, but very needed jobs is going to free up thousands of hours, thousands of dollars, and just free up time to do more important things. So that if you do identify something, then you can investigate it in a much more diligent way, because you've got the free time in order to do that. Scalability is absolutely crucial. And in this example, a large online store, in fact, it's the world's largest online store. They basically have tens of thousands of contract employees coming in different peak periods of the year to meet fulfillment. And so their workforce management team were having to double check the background checks and various other compliance checks for onboarding new employees. And that was massive. So not only was the company itself having to hire contractors for the fulfillment business, but the HR team was having to also hire new HR staff to do the compliance checking. And so it was costing a fortune, and it was also quite laborious and slow. So by introducing RPA robots, they were able to do those compliance checks much more easily. The robots were doing the license checking, etc., automatically, just freeing up time, speeding things up, and also giving the end user, that new employee, a much better experience in the onboarding. From a local perspective, onboarding nurses in Australia is something that's happening in a massive scale at the moment with different health organisations. And so something robots can do is simply take that nurse's ID from their CV, go to the nursing authority website in Australia, punch that number in, and determine whether that particular nurse is registered and licensed to practice. And that's just another quick example of how a robot can be used just to speed up that compliance process in a much more automated way. I kind of touched on staff retention before. So in this example, this insurance organization had a real problem because of the high number of manual checks that needed to be made from different sources. So as you can see in the solution example there, the Excel spreadsheets and data from multiple systems was a real headache for employees. In fact, it was causing a lot of stress, and there was a lot of churn of the employees within that particular team. Again, they've automated now a lot of that compliance checks, a lot of that data validation. And as you can see in the results, we've got some pretty good numbers there. 80% in reduction in processing time. Importantly, the last one, 75% reduction in overtime. What would that mean to you as an organization if you reduced your overtime payments by 75%? Or if you don't pay overtime, what is the benefit of freeing up employees so they don't have to perform that overtime, unpaid overtime? So again, the benefits are both in terms of time, in terms of money, but also in terms of employee satisfaction when we're talking about robotic process automation. And then data aggregation extraction. I'm sure you've all got multiple ERP systems, legacy systems, different applications that all need data being extracted, manipulated, validated, verified, and then moved somewhere else. And again, this is where our robots can come into play. I talked about attended robots that sit on your PC and can do various activities to help you as an individual. When we're talking about data aggregation, these tend to be the unattended robots, the ones that are sitting on a server or a VM somewhere in the back in the back office. They're just working 24/7, churning through work. And this would be an example of one of those types of robots. And if you're looking at the results there, look, you know, the implementation time for this particular solution, which was connecting to SAP, was only 3 weeks. 100% of the effort was automated, 150% return on investment in those 3 weeks. The error rate is down to 0%, and 70% reduction in processing time. So again, significant numbers with a very, very quick turnaround time. And this is really where UiPath DB results together can really make a difference to your organization in terms of automating those really manual, laborious processes. And then finally, compliance validation. Again, in this example, it's around trade settlements. And the big problem here was the number of updated transaction details that were needed in a particular spreadsheet. And this was on each update, it was taking around about 40 minutes. By automating those with a robot, that was down to 3 minutes per transaction. And again, robots are very accurate. As long as they were trained correctly, in this example, we've got a 0% error rate by those robots. And it's saving around 444 hours per year by automating that update of information. So again, hopefully with these examples, I've kind of sparked a little bit of interest around specific key areas, but also at a higher level, you may have thought of other processes that are causing you some grief in your organization. It might be, you know, churn of employees. It might be just freeing employees from mundane work. It might be reducing unpaid overtime that's required to finish work off. It might be scaling things up and down because of seasonal adjustments, etc. So hopefully there's a few ideas there that come to mind. And just to close, I'll just mention very quickly a little bit around the technology. I've talked about the robots and I've talked about the studio, where we design and train the robots. We have a management tool called Orchestrator, that basically scheduling, version control, rollbacks, monitoring, etc., the health, etc., of your robot contingent. So when you've got more than sort of, you know, 3, 4, 5 robots, you're really going to need a management tool, and Orchestrator does that. But what we also do is support the end-to-end effort of your RPA journey. We start with our Explorer suite of products. So this is where your business analysts will work together, and we will then take that initial idea and go, well, is this a good idea? Is it even an RPA relevant idea? And we can immediately, using our algorithms and software, decide whether this is an RPA relevant process. And then we can then guide the project team through various stages of the process as the project develops. And I'll delve into the Explorer and Automation Hub in a moment. As well as automating the little tasks, and really what we've been talking about, I guess, are tasks, we can also do flows and workflows. And we've introduced something called apps, and these are basically simple workflows. So the robot is doing its thing. It's doing some validation of, let's say, a trade settlement. There's a field missing or looks incorrect. The robot is now able to send a request to a team of humans and go, hey, humans, I can't continue. I need some extra information. I need the date of birth for this client. Are they over 18? So the robot will park that particular piece of work into the human's work queue. The robot then goes off and carries on doing other processing as needed. The human will then log in, look at their queue and go, oh, yes, I can help the robot out here. The birth date of this particular client is blah, blah, blah. Press the continue button. The robot will then pick up that new piece of data, add it to its work, and then continue processing that particular transaction. So the apps and workflow and bringing humans into the loop is really powerful. The nice thing about apps as well is that we have a mobile interface as well for the management, and that work queue, those requests to humans can also sit on that mobile platform. So again, your humans don't actually have to be in the office in their PCs. They could be at home, working from home. They don't have access to their PC, and it pops up on their mobile phone for approval or for extra information. And then we have an insights module. This is a reporting module. It gives you a slice and dice of all the data that's inside your RPA solution. So this could be robot information, how many robots are running, how long are they taking to process, where are the bottlenecks. But if the robots are holding business information, you can also surface business information to those reports. And you can start seeing, you know, how much money is going through my processes, how much money is being locked in processes because they're not able to be transacted, etc. So again, insights is very powerful, and I'm sure the DB results team will be more than happy to take you through some examples of the insights product at a later date. And then, as I mentioned before, we do have this automation hub or connect, which binds up all this together and takes you through that initial idea all the way through to the final execution. And so automation hub, I've got a little bit of information on, and also the operating model. So again, we talk about solving governance, risk and compliance using RPA, but RPA itself, when you implement it, should also be governed, risk compliant, etc. And so we do have tools to make sure GRC is adhered to during the deployment of the solutions. How are we doing for time? Because I can wrap up now, or I can show a short video of our automation hub showing an idea go through the process.
I think we might be running a little short on time.
Okay, sorry. In that case, I'll stop there and hand back to you. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, and just for anyone who's interested in seeing this stuff in action, after I've done my bit, those of you who want to hang around in the main room can have a chat to Matt and myself and the team about more of the business side of RPA. And if you want, there's going to be a breakout room that Tony and Steve will be hosting if you want to see the technology in action and get a bit of a demo and discuss things from that perspective. Now, I see there's been a couple of questions posted through there. I think Coden asked a few question there about the tuning process. I see Matt's responded. AC, the question about connectors. We might leave that question until after when we get into the technology room, but we'll certainly come back with answers to all of those throughout this session. But just as I'm flipping back, we have another quick poll to run. So, Kusha, do you want to put that on the screen? So how ready is your organisation to tackle automation with robots? I'm glad no one's answered what is automation at this point in the presentation. Okay, let's see those results. I think we got most of the votes in. We have a clear winner there with I have a few areas in mind that need guidance. So hey, we're here to help. So just let us know, and that's probably a good segue into this next bit. So I'll get through this reasonably quickly, and happy to hang around and talk through it in detail. But just building on from Matt and Tony's presentations, I wanted to talk about robot adoption. I think we're inviting a new member, or almost a new employee, into the organisation. So high output employee, something a little bit different to that you've already had in your organisation, but can add a lot of value. So let's call him Robbie to start with. But we think now is really a good opportunity to invite someone new into your life. Has a little bit extra pressure for that, a lot of change with this work from home lifestyle. And this sort of change and pressure is a great time to unlock innovation. So we think automation is a great opportunity for that, and it's something we need to respond to now to make a difference that can be felt before we get to the new norm, before we end up in somewhere that we don't fully understand, and ride that wave of change. So it's a great opportunity to leverage RPA for that. The sort of challenges that we're seeing, the necessity that's driving that change, obviously relates to the pandemic response, process enhancements for virtual working, but in some of the larger programs, we're seeing tools to help facilitate faster transition and move data, understand processes, replicate processes, transform systems. So it's everything from the process discovery through to the running and improving those processes. It's not just the running of the robot itself, be it attended or unattended. It's actually how you go on that whole journey and how you continue to improve once you've built that capability within your organisation. If you can get that right, you can obviously achieve a lot of benefits. And Tony showed a bunch of case studies there that had some clear benefits, and the ROI on those projects was massive, and I think really compelling to consider when you think about your own organisation. When you're doing that, it's all about reward, and adoption is validated through that reward. So think about some places you can use RPA, and that's typically around processes which are manual and highly repetitive. That's soul-destroying stuff that if you could only automate, you could move on to higher value tasks. They're rule-based processes, they're low exception rates, they're high volume. It's often the stuff that you wish you could replace your system or transform and put something brand spanking new and that does it all, but you just can never get the case up to replace or transform those systems. So it allows you to tackle those challenges without ripping the whole organisation apart and rebuilding it. And there's some clear customer outcomes. I think from the poll today, we saw a lot around customer experience and accelerating benefits from digital, but all of these things are intertwined in the businesses in which we work. And one set of robotics here will help with those outcomes across the board. We saw the Automation Hub now. Since the pandemic hit us, we've actually been running a daily innovation think tank. We've rolled out the Automation Hub internally, and we've been using our hundreds of consultants out in the field to gather ideas from the ground and put them into the Automation Hub, so that as a centre of excellence around robotics ourselves, we can evaluate those ideas and take them back to our customers with some value that's been bubbled up from the organisation, that people are actually feeling the pain to present those ideas for consideration for automation. And this tool we found has been a great capability to source that information, track the cost and time related to each of those implementations, but also the benefits and the reusable components that have come out of that, and manage a portfolio of robotic capabilities. So it's certainly something worth looking at, and we can walk you through that as well. And from giving you ratings and scores based on how it asks you about what you want to automate, through to the management of that process and of your portfolio of automations. It's really quite a powerful portal capability. Going beyond that, I think one of the things we see a lot across all of our programs, we're often taking legacy systems and transforming or replacing them or rationalising, consolidating into new platforms. One of the biggest challenges we have is lack of subject matter experts. I'm sure you all have those challenges in your business and you've been part of projects like this before. I'm a real big fan of the process and activity discovery capabilities that are within the product, and the fact that you can plug this into your existing systems and discover what's actually happening rather than having to dig out of-date documentation out of your archives and try and recreate the process, I think is invaluable. And certainly in this work from home virtual world, getting time with workshopping this stuff with the few SMEs that are around just becomes harder. But having this information, if you can get it in a much more rapid way, will take cost and risk out of your program and also give you the opportunity to say, should I just automate this and make it go faster, or should I transform it and replace it, and balance those things out based on how you're going to get the greatest value delivered for your organisation. So we'll certainly be using this through our transformation programs. And when it comes to implementing this within your organisation, we've got to think about that maturity curve. So there's a few notes here on what that curve can look like from no robots through to fully unattended robots that do the tasks you need without supervision. And there's a spectrum of change through that. The way I like to think of it is, as consultants, we're here for the transformative times to create new stuff, but we're going to leave. And when we leave, we want to leave you with better capability than when we first came in the door. So our goal is to set you up with a mature robotics capability that you can run and manage yourselves when we move on. Because these robots will develop personalities, you'll give them names, they'll become part of your organisation, and they will be key to how you run your business going forward. So have a bit of a think about it, a bit of a takeaway for today. Think about where you might be able to apply it, whether it's related to long-term challenges or something that's hit you because of the pandemic that you want to deal with right now. But there's a few different criteria there to think about. Some of the tasks that can be easily automated and turned into RPA solutions, and Tony mentioned a bit of this in his presentation, but high volume business rules driven repeatable processes, they definitely qualify for automation, and that's something definitely worth looking at. Take a lot of pain out of the organisation. There's a bunch of different ways we can help you across the spectrum, from 1 week proofing of values through to blueprinting how you'd like to set up this capability and deliver projects, delivering projects, capability uplift, excuse me, to outsourced robot factories and beyond. But I'll leave it there. I will hand over for any immediate questions, and those who want can we can go to the breakout room in a tick or hang around for a bit of a chat. Thank you. Thank you to our presenters today. Are there any questions?
We had a question from AC. Did you want to ask that one? Come through in the chat, or I can. The question is, can we use RPA to execute a few activities in a business process management? And can an RPA and BMP coexist?
BPM.
Yeah, I can
Sure.
have a little chat on that one. So my background is BPM. I've worked with TIBCO and Software AG, Global 360, and K2, and a few of the others. And absolutely, RPA actually originally evolved from individual tasks within a bigger BPM type process. What we're seeing now is that the tasks that RPA are performing go beyond just the single task and are now almost processes in their own right. I wouldn't say that you would want to build an end-to-end process like a mortgage process just using RPA. That's not really what it was designed for. But can it coexist and work as within an existing BPM technology tool? Absolutely, and does so in many organizations.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions from the floor?
Hi, Digital Pete. I have a question, actually, just in relation to some of the case studies, which were great. I was wondering what the typical implementation timeline is on some of those case studies that we've seen.
Can take that, Tony.
Sure. Now, obviously, it depends on the complexity of the solution at hand. But I can hand on heart, I would say most RPA phase 1 solutions normally are within the 3 to 6 weeks area. Now, on top of that, you may want to look at extended testing. You may want to look at extended integration and training in terms of robot training and rules. What you'll find is when you start with your RPA journey, what you think the capabilities of the robot were in the initial designs, scope creep is always a problem, and it's something that a good design team will actually try and limit and counter for. So, you know, again, it all depends on availability of resources, but certainly a small Excel-based validation and verification process would easily fit within a 3-week turnaround. Something bigger like the trade. The trade applications where we're looking at multiple systems, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 months, but that would be end to end, and it certainly isn't unreasonable.
And what would the allocation look like in terms of resources? So how many resources would be allocated to deploy a solution within that time frame, whether it's 3 to 6 weeks on the low end or potentially a larger, more complex project on the high end?
Yeah, I mean, again, this depends on the skill set of the participants. What I would answer this with is the drag, drop, and configure studio tool is very easy to build something quick and dirty with. Okay. However, to make it production strength and to give you the sort of, you know, the best practice, you really do need a well-trained team that know what they're doing, both in terms of the theory around RPA as well as the deployment of RPA. And so that's where people get unstuck. They look at the tool and they go, this is so easy, we don't need anyone, we'll just do it ourselves. And suddenly those projects take too long and they often fail because they haven't used the best practice. And so I'd answer it that way. I think the more RPA savvy team implementing your BAs and your developers, the more successful and quicker that project's going to go live.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler and Tony. One last question.
Pete, we lost you there.
Lost you there, Pete.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So from Hayden, I saw a video on LinkedIn of a health survey software bot. Can you please explain what this does?
Is that to me again? So yes.
That's
so,
to you.
We've been addressing a lot of COVID-19 scenarios recently. Something that was needed by a number of large organisations, mainly the mines over in WA seem to be the big users, and also some of the healthcare organisations in Vic and New South Wales, was really an employee health checking solution that allows them to check what are the risks, or sorry, what are the what's the risk factor of a specific employee contracting COVID during the course of their work. So this health survey was deployed via an SMS link into their mobile phone. It asked them, 5 to 10 questions to determine the risk factor that they may or may not have contracted COVID during that course of work. And if the risk factor was too high, a recommendation to self-isolate and work from home for 2 weeks would be made. And so we've managed to turn that around in about 3 days. And we have several organizations now, as we speak, are implementing it and should be going live by the end of next week.
Okay, great. I think we'll take that as the last question there. Now, thanks for that, Tony, and thanks for Matt for presenting as well, and Kusha for running things. We're